So hey guys, welcome back. In my latest video I talked about which were the most underrated bosses in Souls games, and today I'm gonna do the opposite and talk about which ones are the most overrated ones. Now I'm not gonna lie, this is a tough video to make because I don't like to say bad things about bosses that people love, but sometimes in life you have to make tough decisions, so here are my most overrated bosses in each of the Souls games. And starting with Demon Souls, I had a very easy pick, because I went with Maiden Astrea. Now this fight consists of you entering the fog gate, of course, and then you have this knight in front of you that just keeps doing the same attacks over and over again. You parry him a few times, you get to this girl, she says a few lines and she dies, and that's the fight. Now I do understand that people love this fight because of its lore, but for me personally, because I'm not a lore person and also because From Software has their strange ways of presenting their lore, when I entered the fight I simply had no idea who she was, so when she died I could not care less. So even though Maiden Astrea has an incredible soundtrack and the arena is also pretty decent, the fight against the knight is incredibly boring, so it was a very easy pick for the most overrated boss in Demon Souls. Now it's time for Dark Souls 1, and this was kinda tough to choose, honestly. Dark Souls 1 most praised bosses are of course Manus, Artorias, Calamith, the Gargoyles, Ornstein and Smaug, and the one that I chose for the most overrated, which is Gwyn. Now Gwyn is the final boss from Dark Souls 1, and of course you expect a lot from a final boss, and I thought this boss was a bit disappointing. First of all, I think one of the worst things that Gwyn has is how unbelievably fast he is. I think it's unbelievably unfair, the speed of some of his attacks. It is pretty much impossible to react unless you guess. Maybe if he was doing that on Sekiro we could parry that shit, but seriously, some of his attacks are just unreactable in a game so slow as Dark Souls. Another thing that I do not like about Gwyn is the fact that every time we try to heal, it jumps at you, making it almost impossible to heal, because in Dark Souls 1 it is incredibly slow to heal. And I also don't like very much the fact that Gwyn is either incredibly easy if you decide to parry him, or incredibly hard if you decide not to, so I don't think it's a very well balanced boss, and for that it gets my pick for the most overrated boss in Dark Souls 1. And now it's time for Dark Souls 2, and this was an extremely easy pick. I went with a Lost Sinner, which is a boss that I absolutely do not understand why it gets so much love. This is a boss that once you enter, everything is dark and you fight the boss in the darkness unless you do a few things outside of the arena. And it honestly doesn't matter because this boss is crazy easy. It's like a $1 version of Sir Alon. It has a very small moveset where she just keeps doing like 2 attacks and then she jumps back, and occasionally she will do a jump attack. But it's honestly a very limited boss that I do not understand why people love her so much. Maybe it's another lore situation like Maiden Astrea, I do not know, but the Lost Sinner for me it's like a 5 out of 10 maybe, and people seem to give her like an 8 or a 9 out of 10, and I could not disagree more, so she gets the win for the most overrated boss in Dark Souls 2 by far. Now it's time for Bloodborne, and honestly, and you can get mad at me if you want, but I don't think Bloodborne has any overrated boss. I think Bloodborne has 5 bosses that most people praise, which are of course Gehrman, Gascoigne, Ludwig, Orphan of Kos, and Lady Maria, and I think these 5 deserve all the praise that they get. They are absolutely stellar. I don't think any of them is overrated, and besides those 5, I guess most people would say that Logarius is probably the 6th best boss in Bloodborne, but I don't think anyone loves Logarius that much to be considered overrated. I think the run back to him is horrible and his first phase is a bit too simple, but I think he's a cool boss, so I don't think he deserves to be called overrated because I don't see anyone putting Logarius that high as one of the best bosses in Bloodborne. So the 5 bosses that are put in a pedestal in Bloodborne, they deserve to be there. So sorry, but I'm not gonna pick an overrated boss for Bloodborne. And I almost did the same for Dark Souls 3, to be honest, because it was really hard to pick a boss to put as overrated in Dark Souls 3, but I decided to go with the Abyss Watchers. Now the consensus around Abyss Watchers seems to be that this is an S tier boss fight, and to me it's just an A tier boss fight. So I do really enjoy the Abyss Watchers, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad fight, not even an average one, it's a really good one, but I don't think I would put this boss even in my top 10 favorite bosses in Dark Souls 3. And the reason is mostly because the first phase, which is pretty much designed for you to just run away from the 2 Abyss Watchers that try to attack you, because it's close to impossible to fight them by yourself. You basically have to wait for another Abyss Watcher to rise, and then if you're lucky and the RNG is good to you, he's going to be able to fight one of the Abyss Watchers while you fight the other. If you're unlucky and get bad RNG, the 2 Abyss Watchers will go to him, kill him in 10 seconds, and you're gonna see yourself again running for a minute until he rises again. Second phase though, it's pretty cool, even though sometimes it can be a little bit too much of just the game of waiting for him to do a certain attack for you to be able to backstab him, but it's a really cool fight, both visually and also the soundtrack is pretty nice. So the Abyss Watchers are my pick, but to be honest, they're only a little bit overrated. This is a good fight. And now it's time for Sekiro, and this was an incredibly easy pick. I have to go with the Divine Dragon. I don't understand the love for this boss, honestly. Like seriously, when people tell me that Demon of Hatred is a boss that does not belong in Sekiro, I think that the Divine Dragon is the boss that does not belong in Sekiro. Seriously. This is a boss that you start the fight by killing a few random enemies that nobody cares, and then you see this massive dragon on top of the sky, and yes, the visuals are incredible, not gonna lie, the music is also pretty decent, but visuals alone cannot save a boss fight. The fight itself is unbelievably easy in what is a very hard game. It's a boss I never died to. It's a boss that poses no challenge, and again, like, it doesn't feel like it belongs in Sekiro, because unlike every other fight where you're just parrying enemy attacks over and over again and doing Mikiri counter, in here you're jumping between trees like a monkey and throwing lightnings from a mile away. I don't understand why people praise this fight so much. Like seriously, the visuals are not enough to make a boss fight good. The Divine Dragon is a very average boss, and honestly, it feels a bit out of place in this game. And now it's time for Elden Ring, and if some of my picks already piss you off, I'm pretty sure that this one will be the one that is gonna piss you off the most, because I know that pretty much everyone absolutely loves Mohg. And even though, yes, I do like Mohg, I don't think I would put him also in my top 10 favorite bosses in Elden Ring, so I do think he's overrated. Now, the reasons? First of all, I'm gonna start by talking about the lore. Yes, I'm not a lore person, but it's actually quite funny to see that everyone loved the lore on Mohg, only for then the DLC to come out and realize that the lore was nothing what people expected. Then you have the arena, which is unbelievably beautiful, but also has a ton of shit on the floor, on the sides, you know, like vases and tables or whatever. And you also have a set of stairs. Like, all of these things are very annoying during the fight and can get in the way, which I absolutely hate. Is one of the things I really hate about Elden Ring when it comes to arenas. And then the fight itself, I think first phase he suffers a little bit of the Margit syndrome, where you have like these delayed attacks that just take forever to finally land, and I absolutely don't like that. I understand it's to create difficulty, but I was never a fan of that. And then you also have the famous Nihil. Like, visually it's a very cool attack, and I absolutely loved to see him say the words Nihil and all of that, but it's an attack that you cannot dodge in any way, shape or form. And it's kind of crazy that From Software has done hundreds of bosses to this day, and this is the only attack that I know of that cannot be dodged in any way, shape or form. Doesn't matter what you use, it is impossible to dodge this attack, which I think it sucks. And then you have second phase, which is kind of cool, but at the same time I really don't like where he spams like fire into the floor and you're just stepping on the fire and getting stun lock all the time. It really gets in the way of the fight. I really don't like it. And I also think it does a bit too much damage. This is a boss that unless you have an insane amount of health, you're just gonna die in 2 hits every single time. So I don't know, man. I see a lot of people putting Mohg as the best boss in Elden Ring, and even though I do like him, he has a very cool soundtrack, beautiful arena, but I wouldn't even put him in the top 10 bosses in Elden Ring. So yeah, this is my opinion on which are the most overrated bosses in Souls games. Please let me know in the comments which ones do you think are the most overrated ones. And as always, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I see you guys in the next one. Stay well, bye bye guys.